President Trump inches closer to an historic achievement.
This is a huge win for the American people.
Breaking news at this hour on tax reform in the Senate. We're all over it, from the political implications to what's in the deal for you.
Raises taxes on the middle class.
We'll fact check that Democratic talking point. Plus, you saw the immediate reaction right here last night.
This shocking verdict is the worst outcome for the Steinle family.
We'll break down Attorney General Jeff Sessions' brand new comments on sanctuary cities following the not guilty verdict for an illegal immigrant deported multiple times who then shot and killed Kate Steinle.
This possibly violates the Road Act.
These are very serious charges.
And is special counsel Robert Mueller about to build a case around a 218-year-old law that's never been successfully prosecuted? Our legal eagles debate the latest in the Mike Flynn case. Hello and welcome to Fox News at Night. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington, and this is a Fox News alert. From General Michael Flynn cutting a deal to the Senate getting a much different deal done, we are all over it. We're live tonight, starting on the Senate floor, where Republicans appear ready to score their first major legislative victory of the Trump administration. But the White House is going to have to balance that against the news of former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn's guilty plea, with a special counsel investigating the Russia probe, complete with the mainstream media speculation that has already forced a major correction tonight by ABC News. In the Senate, Vice President Mike Pence is set to preside over the vote there, which is likely to take place in the wee hours of Saturday morning. The vice president playing a key role in the lead up to the vote, hosting Republicans for a dinner just a couple nights ago where some of them were on the fence. But it appears his hard work is paying off. Let's bring in Fox News senior Capitol Hill producer Chad Pergram. All right. Good evening to you, Chad. What is happening on the floor right now?
Well, this is what we call a vote-a-rama. Here's a vocabulary term where they go through vote after vote after vote, sometimes taking hours, and it's kind of the precursor to passing the bill, which will happen sometime maybe 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. This is a question right now of when, not if. We believe that they have 51 votes, and they're going to pass this bill sometime later. Vice President Pence is coming, and his vote is not expected to be needed to break a tie. He's just going to preside over the vote. This is on a glide path. There's nothing that Democrats can do to stop this, and they're not pleased.
Historians will mark today as one of the darkest black-letter days in the long history of this Senate. This, unfortunately, is the metaphor for this bill and how high the stench is rising in this chamber as we debate the bill tonight. In my long career in politics, I have not seen a more regressive piece of legislation, so devoid of rationale.
What we're thinking here is that there's not going to be any Democrats who are going to vote for this bill. There were a couple of rumors going around the building that maybe some moderate Democrats up in 2018 might vote yes. That's not going to happen. In fact, one of those Democrats from a swing state told me that they thought that maybe the president, the White House, might have wanted some Democrats to vote yes, but that the Senate Majority Leader Shannon Mitch McConnell made the bill so bad that there was no way they could vote yes for this, and then Republicans could turn that against them.
All right, Chad, so what got us to this point where we are tonight and into the morning?
Well, the key was getting the votes. And obviously, once you get the votes, you're ready to go. And that's where they are right now. We knew that they were, on this glide path, as I said once. Jeff Flake, the Republican senator from Arizona, signaled earlier today that he would vote for the bill. He was concerned about deficit reduction. That's something that turned Bob Corker, the Republican senator from Tennessee, off. He says, we're going to explode the debt here. And that's something that bothered him. Bob Corker is expected to be the only no vote on the Republican side of the aisle, 51-49. Something else that got Jeff Flake to yes was he got assurances from the leadership and the administration that they would address DACA, not in this bill, but this issue dealing with immigration and DACA sometime, he hopes, before the end of the year. And again, high drama here at the Capitol. We expect Vice President Pence to come and preside over that vote sometime, maybe 2 o'clock in the morning, in his capacity as president of the Senate, Shannon.
Well, Chad, you're there 24 hours a day, no matter what is happening. We're very grateful for your input. Stay on it. We'll check back. Thank you, Chad. Well, tonight, retired three-star General Mike Flynn denying what he calls false accusations of treason, while acknowledging he did lie to the FBI, and he's apparently agreed to cooperate with special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election. James Rosen is here to tell us what this means in the bigger picture. Good to see you, James.
Shannon, good to see you. Good evening. He was once the top uniformed intelligence officer in the country. Tonight, Mike Flynn is the highest-ranking official to plead guilty in the Russia investigation. The former head of the Defense Intelligence Agency and White House National Security Advisor admitted lying to FBI agents during an interview in January. Flynn falsely claimed that he never asked Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak last December to refrain from escalating a diplomatic dispute with the U.S. at that time. Flynn also falsely claimed not to remember the phone call in which Kislyak reported that the Kremlin had agreed not to escalate. Flynn also falsely claimed he never asked Kislyak in a separate call to try to get Russia to veto a UN Security Council resolution targeting Israeli settlements. Flynn also claimed never to have heard back from Kislyak on that. Finally, Special Counsel Robert Mueller got Flynn to admit to materially false statements and omissions on federal disclosure forms about his work as a lobbyist for Turkey. Yet Mueller's prosecutors could find that these admissions will be used against Flynn if they place him on the witness stand to testify against higher-ups. The false statements involved, said presidential attorney Ty Cobb, mirror the false statements to the White House officials, which resulted in Flynn's resignation in February of this year. Nothing about the guilty plea or the charge, Cobb added, implicates anyone other than Mr. Flynn. Yet Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law and senior advisor, has been identified as the, quote, very senior transition official who was named in the plea agreement, who, quote, directed Flynn to contact Russian officials about the UN vote. Now, White House sources tell Fox News Kushner simply encouraged the entire team to work the issue. Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein of California said in a statement, this shows a Trump associate negotiating with the Russians before Donald Trump took office. That's a stunning revelation and could be a violation of the Logan Act. It's critical, Feinstein added, that we determine whether Flynn spoke with the Russians on his own initiatives. On the books since 1799, the Logan Act prohibits private citizens from conducting foreign policy without authorization. But Shannon, the last prosecution under the Logan Act was 165 years ago, and even that wasn't carried through.
So it's been a while, is what you're saying.
Let's just call it untested.
Okay, well, we'll see if this case is the test case. James Rosen, thanks for staying up late with us.
Thank you, Shannon.
Good to see you. All right, let's bring in our fair and balanced legal panel. Attorney Cleta Mitchell, who has been a key litigator in those IRS targeting cases, and Bradley Moss, who's a national security attorney. Welcome to you both tonight. Good to have you.
Good evening.
Thank you, Shannon.
I want to start because there's a big analysis now about what this plea deal does or doesn't mean. The fact that we're talking about one charge of lying versus all kinds of other things that we knew that Michael Flynn had been accused of. Kidnapping plots, not registering as a federal agent. Cleta, what does it say to you, this deal that we're seeing today? Is it just the tip of the iceberg, or is this all they have?
Well, it has to be all they have, because I think that the plea agreement this is the package. This is the package that was presented to the court today, and it's a process question. The thing that everybody needs to understand is that while this is very serious, there is a federal statute that makes it a criminal offense, a felony, to make a false statement to any federal agent. At the same time, if they had other criminal offenses to which they would have been expected to plead guilty, those would have been included today. They weren't. So this is it for Michael Flynn, and while it's regrettable, I think that it does underscore that, frankly, if this is all there is, and this took place, the interview with the FBI took place before Robert Mueller became the special prosecutor. This was a carryover from an Obama administration investigation. I think that raises a lot of questions about this whole Mueller investigation.
Well, Bradley, is it that there was a lot more that they potentially could have gotten Michael Flynn on, but because they've now got him giving them other information that was critical about this ongoing investigation and allegations about collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia, that there was much more, but they got what they needed from him, and that's why the only thing we're seeing in the plea deal is this one charge?
Absolutely, Shannon. And so make sure to be distinguished here. This may be all that they had on Mr. Flynn in terms of criminal conduct he engaged in, but it's only, as far as I'm concerned, the tip of the iceberg of what they are getting from him in terms of material information that goes to the overarching investigation into possible Russian collusion. Doesn't mean that Mr. Flynn himself was engaged in any particular criminal activity, but he is, because he was in part of the inner circle, because he saw everything as on the campaign, during the transition, during the early days of the White House, he has significant information he can provide that would provide additional investigative leads for Mr. Mueller's investigation, and that would provide Mr. Mueller with the ability, with additional context, when he starts interviewing even additional members of the inner circle, such as Jared Kushner or Donald Trump Jr. So this may have been all that Mr. Flynn did in terms of criminal conduct, but this is not in any way the end of the investigation into possible Russian collusion.
Okay, I want to read something. Andrew McCarthy, a former federal prosecutor writing in National Review, had this to say. He said, if there was evidence of collusion, Mueller would not be permitting Flynn to settle the case with a single count of lying to FBI agents. Instead, we would be looking at a major conspiracy indictment, and Flynn would be made to plead to far more serious offenses if he wanted a deal. Cleta, it sounds like that's closer to your read on this.
It absolutely is. I mean, let's look at cases, other high-profile cases where individuals, let's talk about Scooter Libby for a moment. Remember the whole Valerie Plame brouhaha? Well, Scooter Libby ended up pleading guilty to a charge of making a false statement to the FBI. And as we now know, the entire Valerie Plame thing was just a media-incited phenomenon. It wasn't real. There was no there. And so I think what this does remind me, to remind everyone who's listening, when the FBI shows up at your door, there are two of them, there's one of you. Don't ever talk to any federal agent or FBI agent without an attorney present, because you can inadvertently say something that could end up being a felony charge. I don't know the circumstances of the interview with General Flynn. I do know that the FBI clearly had tapes of the conversations with the Russian ambassador and General Flynn. So the question arises, why did they need to interview him? I think there's a lot that is pretty sketchy about this, but it is what it is, and it's a serious thing, but I do think that it raises the question of the fact that there's not all the there that the media would have us believe.
Well, as an attorney myself, I think all three of us probably would agree, if you are approached about this kind of situation, best to have counsel before you say anything.
Always.
All right. Thank you both tonight. Great to see you on this Friday night. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Now, back to Capitol Hill. They're calling this a vote-a-rama on the Senate floor. It's the final series of votes clearing the way to an historic vote for tax cuts. Our next guest just cast some of his votes before heading to our camera. Georgia Republican Senator David Perdue is a yes on the bill. He stepped out to visit with us and tell us why. Senator, good to see you tonight.
Hi, Shannon.
Okay, I want to talk to you a little bit about the criticism, because you know there is plenty of it out there. Folks saying, even on your side of the aisle, Senator Bob Corker unable to vote for this because of his fiscal concerns about what it's going to do to the deficit. How do you answer those?
Well, Bob's a really good friend of mine. He and I both are very concerned about the long-term debt crisis that we have. I'm just more optimistic that this bill is going to ignite our economy. President Trump said job one this year was getting the economy going again. So we pulled back on regulations, unleashed our energy potential, and now tonight we have a historic opportunity to change this tax code and make American companies and workers competitive again with the rest of the world.
All right, we're going to break down some of the fact from fiction with an economist coming up a little bit later. But you know, what we're hearing are two completely different sets of talking points, because what we hear on the Republican side is this is going to help working families. It's going to be great from them. From the Democrats, we hear that that's all a lie. This is going to help rich old guys, and it's going to hurt lower and middle income people. Here is what Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said about your plans a little time ago.
The Republican Party is abandoning its long-held principles to please its political paymasters. It's a bad move for the Republicans, as well as a bad move for America.
I've heard a lot from the Senate floor tonight. I heard Senator Bernie Sanders saying that you're essentially robbing the Treasury in the middle of the night while no one's watching. Senator Wyden also saying that essentially this is getting done, especially the health care part of it, without a single major hearing that's been public. So how do you respond to those criticisms from across the aisle?
Well, Shannon, over the last many months, we've had over 70 hearings in the Senate, open hearings about this issue of tax reform. But let's talk about American people that are going to benefit from this. A median income family of four today making $73,000 a year will have their taxes cut over 60%, Shannon. And a single mom with one child making $41,000 a year, which is a median income for a single worker, will get a 75% tax cut. And more importantly than that, over 3 million, some between 3 and 6 million people are estimated, will actually have their taxes go to zero. And more important than that, the best beneficiary of this is the person that will get a job, because the economy is going to be ignited. President Trump has really pushed us and encouraged us and cajoled us to really make this thing where it will help American businesses grow. And I believe we've accomplished that. We are the highest corporate tax rate in the world. And the corporate tax rate, Shannon, is a huge penalty on the American worker. I know. I've lived in Asia. I've worked all over the world. We are going to become tonight more competitive with the rest of the world.
Do you think that once this goes to conference, because that's my understanding is that's going to be the path this takes with the House, there will be more transparency that will give the public a better look at exactly what's actually in the bill itself?
Well, I think that's true, but let me say this. This has been a fully transparent process. I mean, I hear the rhetoric tonight, but my goodness, this is coming from the same folks that said in the House a few years ago where Speaker of the House Pelosi said, hey, you gotta pass the bill to find out what's in it. This is the same group of folks that are making the comments tonight. Look, this has had an open process. This is regular order. We had it in committee. We had amendments. We're having amendments tonight. It'll go to conference, and all of this will be in the light of day. So this is a vote-a-rama. All of these vote-a-ramas go in the middle of the night like it always has. So there's nothing new here tonight.
Well, we hope you have a little caffeine over there. If that's your particular advice in getting through this, we know it'll be a late night and an early morning. Senator Perdue, thanks for taking a break to talk with us.
Thanks, Shannon.
Check out those sirens. That's Hawaii's nuclear warning system. It's the first state to bring back the Cold War era sirens, which will test about once a month. The sirens do actually sound slightly different than the ones they use for tsunamis and other disasters. Hawaii, of course, the closest state to North Korea. It's got a high military presence as well and could be a target for the rogue regime. They want to be ready. Attorney General Jeff Sessions speaking out tonight on the not guilty verdict in the trial of an illegal immigrant who admitted to shooting and killing 32-year-old Kate Steinle. His comments next, and what he's now planning for sanctuary cities in the wake of the Steinle trial. Flowers tonight for Kate and California vigils there as well as the impact of the verdict actually sets in across the country. And pressure grows for Minnesota Democrat Senator Al Franken to quit, as a growing number of Democrats now claim there is a double standard being applied to Michigan Democrat John Conyers. Details ahead on the sex harassment scandals plaguing the nation's capital. President Trump's among those blasting a San Francisco jury's verdict in the Kate Steinle case. On Twitter, calling it, quote, a complete travesty of justice and urging Congress to now fund the border wall. Trace Gallagher's in Los Angeles to tell us more. Trace. All right, we're having a little bit of a technical difficulty with Trace, so let's do this. We know about the case last night. This individual who had been deported 5 times, 7 felony convictions. He was found not guilty of murder and involuntary manslaughter. He was convicted on 1 gun charge. So let's talk about that, because last night's verdict renews a heated debate here on Capitol Hill, where in June, the House actually passed a measure stiffening penalties for illegal immigrants who commit crimes. 24 House Democrats crossed over to support the bill, but months later, the GOP-controlled Senate still has not taken up this measure.
What you have is a lot of Democrats who are going out of their way to protect these individuals, and that was the case that we have here in San Francisco.
That was Congressman Lee Zeldin. He was on our program last week, noting that the Senate Republicans, they've got to have 8 Democrats to help them pass this law, Kate's Law. So let's bring in our panel. Vince Colanese is the editorial director for the Daily Caller, and Isaac Wright is the former executive director of the pro-Hillary Clinton super PAC, Correct the Record. You guys both have like 10 other jobs. We just don't have time to say them all when we're introducing you. So welcome. It's good to see you guys tonight. All right, let's talk about this. I want to play a little bit of what the defense attorney, he won this case, what he said this was about. There were a lot of political conversations around this case and the verdict last night. Here's what he said.
From day one, this case was used as a means to foment hate, to foment division, and to foment a program of mass deportation. It was used to catapult a presidency along that philosophy of hate.
Vince, I'll let you take the first swing at that.
Well, what does politics exist for if not to address issues that need to be solved in our communities? This is clearly one of them. I mean, this case has cemented San Francisco's status as a city that it both disregards the law and doesn't have a capacity to enforce it, apparently. Because you have a case go before a court, And they can't even find him guilty of involuntary manslaughter, which by its very definition is what occurred here. They charged him with possession of the weapon. What more did they need to do in order to prove that this was involuntary manslaughter? This is a monumental miscarriage of justice, and now the federal government's going to take a stab at it.
Yeah, and in fact, we had the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, talking about this with Tucker a short time ago. We want to play that, and then we'll get your reaction, Isaac.
We are confident, and we are going to do everything possible to ensure that happens, although there are some potential other charges that could be brought against him. And before being deported and released, we think he should face every charge that is proper to be brought against him. And you can be sure our Department of Justice is working right now to bring any charges that are appropriate.
So, Isaac, it then sparks this conversation again here in Capitol Hill about building the wall, about DACA is something that the Democrats want to, sort of negotiate over with government spending next week when we run out of money. It changes the immigration debate, at least for a few days after this verdict.
Yeah, well, I think this is more of a criminal justice issue than an immigration issue. The defense's argument, from what I've read, seems to have some holes in it potentially, but hopefully if there's a federal charges brought, they can sort that out. As far as the relation to immigration, I mean, the question here, when he was held and released by the local authorities in California, he was being held on a drug charge. He was a nonviolent offender up until that point. Now, there is,
he did have 7 felony convictions.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
this
5
is somebody.
deportations.
This is somebody who was a criminal. Absolutely, he was a criminal, and he did not need to be here.
But Isaac,
to say absolutely right.
To say that it's not an immigration issue, though. I mean, the predicate to this is the immigration policy, and San Francisco immigration policy specifically, is the reason he was in the country and murdered an American woman. This wouldn't have been a criminal justice issue if he was kept out of the country.
But that's exactly the problem. Why are our cities having to set our national immigration policy? That shouldn't be the responsibility of San Francisco. That shouldn't be the responsibility of any one city. That's where Congress has failed to pass comprehensive immigration reform, and we're pushing that duty onto cities, and we're leaving it to cities' discretion of what to do. And the problem is...
But when they decide they're not going to cooperate with federal requests, these detainer requests, where they know this guy has been in and out of the country 5 times, 7 felony convictions, and then they've got a request from the feds, from the immigration officials, hold on to him, and they say, nope, we're just going to let him go, and then this happens.
So that's exactly the problem of where people are missing the background. I used to work in state government, and I can tell you, folks who work in state government and municipal government frequently get frustrated with Washington Beltway thinking, the fact that Washington is out of touch with what's happening in the rest of America. We pay federal taxes for Congress to set an effective immigration policy, which they have failed to do. We pay federal taxes for the administration and for ICE specifically to enforce immigration policy, which they are failing to do. Instead, they're passing the buck to municipalities and to states and saying, look, we know it's not your job, it's ours, but while we're too incompetent or unwilling to do the job, we're going to ask that local law enforcement handle this. And when somebody is pulled over for a speeding ticket or for a marijuana cigarette and they're an undocumented immigrant, hold them in your jail and use the resources for that instead of known murderers and rapists and prisoners that will be let out in their place.
But this guy did have multiple convictions, you know that, and when they were letting him go, the feds had asked that he be held. They knew there was a risk this guy was going to, continue to be in this country illegally, potentially commit other felonies. So how is that the feds' fault that they let him go?
The feds' fault that they weren't there to pick him up. Right? That's part of the problem.
But they said, you hold him and we'll come get him.
You cannot ask these. But the problem is, when you, in practice, these state prisons, these municipal jails are left often for weeks or months waiting on somebody to come pick these prisoners up. So in those months, while you have somebody who is
this is silly. This is silly because
you're going to let that person.
This is silly. The states are not setting immigration law here. The federal government is. The federal government had custody of him, handed him over to state authorities to prosecute that state case, and then they just sent him out into the street. They didn't give him back to the federal government.
Well, I think we can all agree that the system is broken and it needs some kind of fixes one way or the other, and how that gets done is where the devil is in the details. So good to see you both.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And now you're ready for Friday night to go out after getting your blood pressure up. All right. We are monitoring that vote-a-rama on Capitol Hill as the Senate nears approval of potentially historic tax cut bill. It would be a major victory for President Trump. Coming up, as another lawmaker's secret sexual harassment settlement is unveiled, there is a bipartisan effort to unmask every lawmaker who has spent your money to make these harassment cases disappear.
Enough is enough. Members of Congress who commit these egregious acts or congressional staffers should not be allowed to hide behind closed doors, anonymity, and these non-disclosure agreements, while taxpayers have essentially been forced to pay for their misconduct.
And by the way, if you are confused about exactly what's in the Senate tax bill, you're not alone. Our next guest has been studying all the fine print, so he's going to separate fact from fiction about what the law could actually mean to your wallet. Stay with us. New allegations about yet another lawmaker accused of harassment and a hush-hush settlement. Texas Republican Congressman Blake Farenthold reportedly settled with his former spokeswoman for $84,000. Those are taxpayer dollars. The news comes as Democratic Congressman John Conyers' attorneys say he is not going anyway for now, despite the growing claims of sexual harassment against him. Ellison Barber has more for us tonight.
He will continue to defend himself until the cows come home.
Another day, another adamant denial from the man representing Congressman John Conyers.
His health is not the best. We will make another announcement in the coming days as to whether the congressman will continue or whether he will step aside.
He attacked the credibility of one of Conyers' accusers.
She appears to be an opportunist.
At least 3 former staffers accused Conyers of sexual harassment. The 88-year-old denied all of it, but admitted to one thing: paying off Marion Brown, an accuser, with $27,000 from his office's budget. He's not the only one on Capitol Hill to settle allegations of misconduct. According to a new report in Politico, 84,000 taxpayer dollars were used to settle a sexual harassment claim against a sitting member of Congress.
Mr. Farenthold is recognized for 5 minutes.
Texas Republican Representative Blake Farenthold.
Hello, everyone.
$100,000 reportedly went to at least 2 young male staffers who accused former Representative Eric Massa of sexual harassment. The New York Democrat resigned in 2010. Today, the House Ethics Committee sent a letter to the Office of Compliance asking them to provide the committee with all records related to claims of sexual harassment, discrimination, and retaliation. Some members of Congress are trying to pass legislation to make all of the payouts public and ban them in the future. But what about the lawmakers facing harassment allegations for things that happened outside of the office?
No one's asked Al Franken to step down, and there are photos, and there is an admission.
New information tonight coming from the Committee on House Administration. They've released initial statistics from the Office of Compliance, all related to this so-called secret slush fund. Since 2013, the fund has paid out a little over $359,000 to settle purported violations of congressional rules. They say one claim settled for $84,000 included allegations of sexual harassment. The biggest payout was for alleged veteran discrimination and retaliation. That was settled for $150,000. Shannon?
Ellison Barber, thank you very much. And as we've been reporting, the Senate continuing right now to vote on tax reform. Democrats criticizing the GOP tax plan, saying it's going to do exactly the opposite of what Republicans are promising it will.
They claim it's going to create jobs. Experts tell us the exact opposite. And they're once again telling families to place their faith in tired, trickle-down economic theories. And we have seen how that works. It doesn't.
All right, so here to help us separate fact from fiction, Brian Brenberg. He's the chair of the program in business and finance at the King's College in Manhattan. Brian, great to have you with us tonight. A big night as we stand by for this vote.
Yeah, it can't get bigger than this for tax reform. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so let's have you separate a little fact from fiction. We'll start with this. The first statement: the Senate tax bill cuts taxes for the rich while raising taxes on the middle class. What's the truth there?
We hear this time and again from the critics of the bill. Look, it's not true, and they actually know better. The average middle-income family is going to see a tax cut through 2025 of about $850 a year. Now, what they're latching onto is that in 2025, the individual tax cuts expire in the Senate plan. But the reason for that is because there's no Democrats who will vote for the plan, and so the budget rules actually require the Republicans to phase that out. If the Democrats don't like that, they can solve this problem really easily. Vote for the bill. If they vote for the bill, if you get 60 votes for this thing, the individual tax cuts are permanent.
Well, and as our Chad program reported earlier, at least one of the Democrats, I think it was Senator Joe Manchin, said basically they've crafted this bill in a way so that not a single Democrat would ever vote for it. So we're at an impasse on that. This is going to be on partisan lines. Okay, so let's get to the second one. The tax bill is a giveaway to big corporations.
Look, what's really going on here with corporations is that they face one of the highest corporate tax rates in the developed world. Our rate in the U.S. at 35% is much higher than the average rate. And as a result, we've seen dozens of companies leave the U.S. every year for the past few years because of that tax rate. What this bill does, it says, let's make our tax rate competitive with the rest of the world. Let's get companies to come back here and invest their money here. Look, when you don't penalize companies for doing business, they invest that money. We touch corporations all the time, whether it's investing in with our 401k, whether it's working for those corporations, that ends up as money in people's pockets. So this line that corporations are getting a giveaway here is just, it's really too much.
All right, we don't have much time left, but I want to get to this last one here. The tax bill is going to explode budget deficits.
It's going to add to deficits. I don't think there's an argument there. It probably will add to deficits because it's a tax cut. Tax cuts are meant to cut taxes, to reduce tax revenue. But the issue with that is not cutting taxes, it's reforming spending. If you want to bring budget deficits back under control, you have to reform spending. Nobody wants to talk about that right now, and we're getting a lot of Johnny-come-latelys when it comes to being concerned about deficits. But the real way to deal with that is to reform spending. There's a lot of work to do there.
Absolutely, on both sides of the aisle. Brian Bremberg, great to have you with us tonight. Have a great weekend.
You bet. You too.
All right, coming up, as the Senate votes on tax reform, the House is preparing to vote on a gun rights bill the left calls incredibly dangerous. So what's the truth? Well, we'll ask the man, the congressman behind that legislation. He joins us now live next. And the search for a missing toddler continues 5 days with no sign of Mariah Woods. We'll have the very latest on that investigation.
I pray she comes home safe and whoever's responsible for this gets justice served to them.
While the Senate tackles tax reform, the House will take up another, perhaps more controversial issue, guns. The House has set up a vote on a bill that would allow owners of legally concealed weapons to take them across state lines in a more uniform way. North Carolina Congressman Richard Hudson is the sponsor of the bill. He joins us now live. Good to see you tonight.
Great to be with you.
Okay, so you know that this is controversial because, listen, the backlash has, I'm sure you've not been surprised by it, but tell us what the bill would do.
Well, when you talk about the backlash, Shannon, frankly, the American people are sick of liberal elites in New York and San Francisco trying to tell us how to run our lives, trying to tell us that we don't have the right to defend ourselves, defend our families. This is just simple, common sense legislation that says if you're a law-abiding citizen trying to do the right thing, we're not going to turn you into a criminal because you cross an invisible state line.
And that does happen to people. I mean, if they are able to legally carry in their state, there's confusion sometimes, and good people do end up with serious charges against them. But your critics include the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. He says this: many states out west and in the South with lax gun laws let just about anyone carry a gun concealed. Under this law, if Wyoming or Alabama said any person could carry a concealed gun, they could come to Times Square, Penn Station, carrying that gun concealed. No one would even know about it.
Well, I hate to tell the leader that he ought to take the time to actually read the legislation, because the legislation doesn't allow, it doesn't dictate what states and municipalities have to do in terms of concealed carry. So for all it says is that the states have to recognize that concealed carry permit from other states. So if someone from North Carolina has a concealed carry permit, if this legislation passes, when I go to New York, I've got to follow New York's laws. They actually have a state law that you can't have a magazine larger than 8 rounds. I've got to follow that law. They have a law that you can't conceal carry in Times Square. I have to follow that law. And so the states and municipalities can make whatever rules they want to make. All we're saying is when I cross that state line, I don't automatically become a criminal.
Okay, so is it your take that the left knows better, or that they're confused about the legislation? Or do you want to take the fifth on that one?
You see Michael Bloomberg, who's the liberal former mayor of New York, who said he's going to spend $25 million stopping this legislation. You've got an official in New York who said that ISIS wants us to pass this bill. I mean, just crazy rhetoric comes from these folks, and it just makes you shake your head and wonder, who are these liberal elites, and what kind of world do they live in? Because what we're talking about is law-abiding citizens. There was a study done in Texas and Florida that showed that off-duty police officers commit crimes more often than concealed carry permit holders. So we're talking about law-abiding people who are trying to do the right thing to protect themselves, protect their families. We're not talking about criminals. And frankly, to believe their rhetoric, you would have to believe that someone contemplating committing an armed robbery in New York City is not deterred by the crime of armed robbery or the consequences of that or the potential consequences. They're not concerned about the illegal weapons charge. What's stopping them from doing that robbery is the fact that if they conceal that gun, it's illegal. It's just, it doesn't make sense.
Do you think that you'll have bipartisan support? Do you have
Absolutely.
some Democrats that will buy in on the House side?
We already have 3 Democrat co-sponsors. There's a number of Democrats I've talked to who are planning to vote for the bill. We will have support. In the Senate, Senator Cornyn has a companion piece of legislation. He's long been a champion of Second Amendment rights. I'm proud to stand with him on this issue. But he had this bill, a similar bill, constitutional carry, on the floor of the Senate in 2015. And there were actually 7 Democrat senators who are still in the Senate who voted for that legislation. 5 of them happen to be up for re-election if that matters. That may matter.
So you would need one more, obviously, to get
we
this to the
need to hold the
President's
Republicans. We need 8 Democrats. I think the votes are there. We'll see.
All right. Well, thank you for coming to separate a little fact from fiction for us. And we'll watch this vote in the House next week, correct?
Absolutely. Next week. We're looking forward to it. And the American people, polls show 73% of the American people want this bill passed. They'll have their day next week.
We'll see that opportunity. All right. Keep us updated.
We will. Thank you so much.
All right. Police and volunteers right now still hunting for 3-year-old Mariah Woods. An Amber Alert's been issued for the little girl who's been missing since Monday. Dive teams are searching nearby waterways and wooded areas. The girl's mother says she last saw her on Sunday night when she checked on her around 11 p.m. Sunday. She says her boyfriend says that he saw Mariah about an hour later that same evening. And the child's biological father says he doesn't believe them. So far, police have not named any suspect or divulged any theories that they may have about what happened. Instead, that search continues. Well, coming up, a national security forum bringing experts from coast to coast together. Jennifer Griffin is live with a preview.
Shannon, I'm here at the Reagan National Defense Forum where NSA National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster and CIA Director Mike Pompeo will speak tomorrow. We'll have a preview coming up.
And later, across the pond, the first public engagement for the royal lovebirds. How'd it go? This weekend, top national security analysts, advisors, and lawmakers will address threats to our homeland and abroad. National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin is there live at the Reagan Presidential Library to tell us more. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Shannon. Well, this is my 4th year at the Reagan National Defense Forum, and this is one of the premier national security forums. And what makes it so premier is that so many top officials from the Pentagon, congressional leaders, members of the defense industry, as well as national security advisors like H.R. McMaster, who's going to be here tomorrow, they come together to discuss readiness and issues of how to rebuild the military. Tomorrow, I'm going to be hosting a panel focusing on readiness with the head of the Marine Corps, General Robert Neller. I spoke to the head of the powerful chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, who explained to me why there is such a crisis in readiness.
Something is wrong. And part of what's wrong is that we have been stretching our military thinner and thinner, asking them to do more and more, but not giving the resources they need to do what we ask them to do. It is a crisis when we have an increasing number of accidents, some of which, unfortunately, take the lives of our military personnel. I think it's a crisis when more than half of the F-18s in the Navy cannot fly today because they are waiting on maintenance.
A year and a half ago, we were the first to report how Marine aviators were being forced to cannibalize parts from museum planes before deploying to the Middle East. We visited a B-1 base in South Dakota where we found that half of the Air Force's B-1 bombers could not fly. Airmen have had to scrounge for spare parts in a remote desert scrap heap known as the Boneyard. Here are some more stats. In the Marines, 70% of the F-18 Hornets and heavy lift helicopters can't fly. The Air Force is short nearly 2,000 pilots. The Navy has 41 fewer warships than it did on 9/11. Only 5 of 58 Army brigades are ready for combat today. And in fact, the Navy has half as many ships as they did during Ronald Reagan's era. The bottom line, Shannon, the military is stretched. It's being asked to do more with less. And this same military, this is the same military that's being asked to make preparations for a possible intervention in North Korea. And there are some who have been in the defense industry industry a long time who are very concerned. We'll be discussing all of this and having live coverage here from the Reagan Library tomorrow. Shannon?
Yeah, and Jennifer, you've done very in-depth reporting on that threat and just how tough the state of the military readiness is and the threat that poses to our men and women who are serving. So we thank you for that, and we know that'll continue throughout this weekend. Thanks, Jennifer. And as well as what Jennifer was telling you about, Bret Baier is going to be out there moderating panels at Reagan National Defense Forum as well. And on Sunday, Fox News Sunday will broadcast live from Simi Valley. Chris Wallace will interview National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster, so check your local listings for time and channel. Coming up, a suspicious device in a crowded Christmas market. Find out where in the world it happened. And Christmas lights aren't just a thing for suburbia. They're lighting up the tropics, too.
I grew up in the 80s. This is very high tech for me. It is so beautiful to watch. In our time, we used cans to make music. Now, as you can see, there are different effects.
More international stories we wanted to bring you, but there are things happening live in D.C. tonight, and that is not often the case on a late Friday night. So you're looking there live at the Capitol as they are still on the floor getting ready to vote on the Senate bill. The Vice President, who is the President of the Senate, will head over there any moment. Mike Pence will arrive to oversee the vote, and we'll keep you updated throughout the night. Most watched, most trusted, most grateful you spent the evening with us. Good night from Washington. I'm Shannon Bream.